while Lu Sheng's spear was embedded in the ground behind him. He put his hand over his eyes and silently pondered. He began to remove his hand from his face, and with a worried look, he thought that this sensation conveyed by the immortal cells was not feigned. He closed his eyes and activated his mental power. This only happened when something happened to him or to someone important to him. He didn't know who this person could be. He clenched both fists tightly, and his body began to emit powerful golden waves that started to spread throughout the cave. Martial practice could continuously uncover amazing treasures within the human body. Predicting fortune and misfortune was a minor divine martial skill. The perception of crisis could prevent one from entering dangerous places and allowed one to avoid direct confrontations with irresistible opponents. Now Lu Sheng's 3 immortal cells were greatly amplifying this ability. Lu Sheng began to picture his parents smiling, then his sister and Snowy, then Qin, and finally his friend Liu Kaiming. He opened his eyes and with a lost look began to stare at the ground. According to him, this was too confusing as he couldn't pinpoint the exact source. He took out his mobile phone, and while holding it with one hand, he decided to investigate one by one. He started to browse through the phone and realized that the signal in the cave was weak. He couldn't make calls with the mobile nor send messages. He hoped that the person in danger wasn't too far away because otherwise, he wouldn't be able to get there in time. He gathered momentum and leapt. While holding the spear with one hand, he clenched the fist of the other and started propelling himself against the walls of the cave. He was close to the gold mine, so he decided to finish this as soon as possible. Some time later, he reached another part of the cave which was filled with gold. He began to look ahead and, upon seeing that he had found the gold, he couldn't help but feel happy. He gripped the spear tightly, put the other hand in front of his face, and while moving at great speed, with a serious look he realized that he couldn't detect the person with his mental power. This meant that there were a few masters from the evil sect inside the cave. He also realized that not all parts of the cave were connected to each other. He brought the spear close to his face and it began to emit powerful and intense flames. He started to stare intently at the gold and decided it was time to get to work. Lu Sheng gathered momentum and, using the spear, delivered a strong and powerful strike to the wall of the cave where the gold was. Several seconds later, upon hearing the sound of the strike, a mutant beast with the form of a worm appeared behind him. It opened its mouth and began to roar. Lu Sheng, who was holding the spear with one hand, started to look to the side and remain still. He began to turn around, and with a look full of rage, he asked the mutant beast not to bother him. He turned around and, with little effort, precisely moved the spear and sliced the mutant beast's body in half. Not far from the area, there was another team that had killed several mutant beasts, and now they were collecting the important parts. The bald man who was standing over the beast's corpse began to look to the side, and with a confused look, asked the others where the sound of the strike had come from. He smelled a strong scent of blood and didn't know if it was from a beast or a person. The man on the ground began to look in the direction from which the sound of the strike had come. He responded that he didn't know and decided to go see what was happening. On the other side of the cave, there was a man standing over the corpse of a giant mutant beast. His body was surrounded by a powerful energy, and he was holding a sword. While his body was emitting a sinister energy, he clenched his fist tightly, started to look at the beast's corpse, and with a confused look, began to wonder why Shangyi was so powerful. His power was much greater than his own. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but become enraged. He leapt and, to vent a bit, delivered a strong kick to the face of another beast that had appeared, causing its body to be flung to the side. He didn't understand why he couldn't withstand even a single blow from Shangyi. He began to get even angrier and started to look at the ground. He should have been happy for having defeated an 8th level beast on his own, but he didn't know why he felt so irritated now. While he was distracted, a powerful golden energy started to approach him. He caught the energy with his hands and couldn't help but feel a bit confused, as he didn't know what was happening. He moved the energy to one side, turned to one side, and with a furious look began to ask who was making so much noise in the cave, and also if they did not know that he was in a bad mood. At that moment, pieces of gold floating and surrounded by purple energy appeared. The person controlling the gold was none other than Lu Sheng. While holding the spear with one hand, he extended the other towards the sky, began to control the gold, started looking at it with a joyful expression and could not help but start smiling and thought that this amount was considerable. According to him, there were many minerals in this area. While he was distracted, 3 mutant beasts began to approach him from behind and prepared to attack. He started to look at the ground and remain still. While he was controlling the gold with one hand, he put the other into his pants pocket and simply began to walk. Just before the beasts could attack, a powerful barrier appeared around his body. The beasts attempted to attack but merely collided with the barrier. Lu Sheng sighed, started to picture Red Jade and the others, and thought that after all, this time he didn't have any workers, he would have to carry all the gold back little by little. At that moment, he felt a strange sensation and inadvertently dropped the spear. He began to feel a sharp pain in his chest, and with a perplexed look, started to stare at the ground. He thought that this sensation was like before, as if his heart had been suddenly squeezed. He concluded that this must have something to do with someone important to him. It didn't take him long to realize that this meant someone important to him was about to face something dangerous, something so strong that he wouldn't be able to get there in time. Just before the spear could fall to the ground, he caught it with his hand, while his body was surrounded by purple energy, and he was controlling the gold with the other hand. He deactivated his power, causing the pieces of gold to drop to the ground. Then he turned his head to one side and decided to forget about the rest of the minerals and just take one piece. While his eyes were glowing, he began to look ahead and couldn't help but go on alert upon seeing what had appeared. Several men arrived at the area, and upon seeing so many mystical minerals, they couldn't help but feel excited and happy. Lu Sheng simply remained silent. One of the men started to run, passed by Lu Sheng, and revealed to the others that he had found a mineral mine. While Lu Sheng was controlling a piece of gold, the bald man approached him, extending his hands to the sides. Seeing how large the piece of gold was, he remained astonished and began to sweat. Lu Sheng began to recall himself carrying food home and being followed by dogs. To him, this was like when stray dogs would follow him home when he had food. While his eyes were glowing, he started to stare at them intently. He decided to leave the rest of the minerals for them and asked them to let him pass. The bald man grabbed a piece of gold, and while holding it in his hand, he turned his head back and, with a smile, asked him if he was joking. Near the area, there was the corpse of a mutant beast shaped like a centipede. The bald man approached the corpse, started touching it with his hand, and with a smile, explained to Lu Sheng that he had made a lot of noise while mining, not knowing that the mineral attracts beasts. According to him, this was probably going to attract a large number of mutant beasts, so for this reason, he didn't know how they were going to extract the remaining mineral. He started staring at Lu Sheng and with a smile, advised him to give them a portion of the piece he was holding in his hand so everyone could leave safely together. Lu Sheng began to walk towards him and asked what he was saying, adding that he couldn't hear him well. While his eyes and body were surrounded by a powerful energy, he started to stare intently at the bald man and asked if he could repeat what he had just said. Feeling Lu Sheng's energy, the bald man began to sweat profusely, and he and the others became frightened, thinking that this was not good. The tension in the air grew, and at that moment, someone appeared and asked Lu Sheng if he was the one who, by striking here, had attracted the beasts with the noise. The man wearing a red shirt appeared. While holding a sword in one hand, he clenched the other tightly, and began to look at Lu Sheng with a furious expression as he started walking towards him. The men recognized him as Jai Zun. He began to look at them and with a smile asked if they knew him. The bald man clasped his hands together, bowed his head before him as a sign of respect, and with a forced smile asked if he was joking, and also who in the entire military district could not know the second in the overall military star ranking. Lu Sheng, who was holding the spear with one hand and the piece of gold with the other, began to look at the ground and asked them if they knew who he was. Jai Zun began to crack his knuckles, and with a disrespectful look told him that he didn't know who he was and also did not need to know. He also added that a moment ago, he had bothered him with the noise, and right now he was in a very bad mood. He approached Lu Sheng, started looking into his eyes, and with a smile suggested leaving all the minerals or letting these people take care of collecting and taking away all the mineral. Lu Sheng, who was holding the piece of mineral, simply remained silent and did not say a single word. The bald man began to sweat. He put his hand in front of the others and explained to them that they were now going to watch Mr. Jai Zun's performance. He hoped that he could leave him at least a little bit of mineral. At that moment, Lu Sheng stopped controlling the piece of mineral, causing it to fall to the ground. Jai Zun approached him even closer, began to stare at him intently, and couldn't help but start smiling when he saw that in the end he had understood how things worked here. Lu Sheng began to look at the ground and asked them what their martial intuition served them for. He grabbed the spear tightly, and his body began to emit demonic energy. He started looking down, clenched his fist tightly, and asked them why they couldn't feel his energy, adding that he was really in a hurry and very irritated. He lifted his head, and while his eyes were shining, he began to stare at Jai Zun with a murderous look and asked them why they had to bother him right at the— This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.